Welcome to Canada's first ever multicultural marketing podcast. I'm Sharifa Khan, founder and president of Balmoral Multicultural Marketing. In each episode, join me as I interview high-profile marketing executives where they will be sharing their experiences in reaching Canada's diverse community. Gain valuable insights and lessons and grow your multicultural affluence. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's episode of podcast. I'm so excited that we have a special guest. He's Aaron GlynWilliams, Director of Social Responsibility at the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, also known as OLG, which is a crown corporation of the Government of Ontario. Just before we kick off with my conversation with Aaron, I would like to share a little bit of background about him, and I think that you will find it very impressive. Aaron helps governments and industry deliver positive outcomes for communities and strengthen public trust. He loves supporting organizations through periods of transformation and also thrives in an environment that require political acuity, strategic thinking, and critical communications. His past experience, which is quite a lot, even though I think he's still very young, include leading teams at the Pan Am Games, Pride Toronto, Toronto Pearson International Airport, and Election Ontario, just to name a few, and is known for unlocking the value of data to support organizational decision-making, and is also an experienced nonprofit board director supporting diverse communities. And by the way, he also speaks 3 languages: French, Spanish, and of course, English. Since taping our podcast, Aaron has accepted a promotion at OLG and now serves as Chief of Staff. Congratulations, Aaron. I'd like to start the interview asking you about specifically what you do with PlaySmart OGG, and also generally speaking, and also within the context of your experience with multicultural marketing.
Well, PlaySmart is the player-facing, the customer-facing brand that OLG uses for all of its responsible gambling initiatives and programs. And one of the key aspects about that is what we call our player education materials. And that's making sure that we are helping our players understand how our games work. We're dispelling maybe common misbeliefs or superstitions about gambling, and that players are aware of all the supports that we make available to make sure that you're having fun when you're playing. Gambling is a form of entertainment. It should be fun. It should remain that way. And if you're not having fun, we want to make sure you're aware of all of the supports that we have available for you. So that is something that is hard to do. It's not as straightforward as selling a product where you've launched the new chip or you've got a software upgrade and you're promoting you're promoting that aspect. This is about having self-reflection, ensuring that we broaden awareness of all those supports as I was mentioning. And in order to do that, you have to speak to people in a more personal and targeted way. It's not really something that's successful if you have one message for everyone. And so that's a big part of where multicultural fits in. OLG, of course, benefits from having a very diverse player base, and that continues to grow. And the way certain communities experience or enjoy gambling can differ. And we want to make sure that we're speaking to those players in a really relevant and effective way. And in order to do so, one of the things you have to be aware of is the identity and the cultural background of the players you're talking to.
And also talking about addiction, any kind of addiction, you know, of course, in gambling, is that not a lot of people even know that they are addicted. And feeling that, oh, maybe I would score another next time. So an admission is probably the hardest to cut through, right?
Yeah, well, behavioral addictions are very challenging and difficult. There's often a journey to get there. You don't necessarily wake up one day and realize that. And so it's certainly something where you want to make sure that you've got a broad set of supports for players and that you are communicating and interacting with people at all the steps along the journey. You don't necessarily want to wait until someone is having a problem. It's much harder to engage with players there. And when we talk about PlaySmart and our responsible gambling program, that really is something that's meant for all players. If you're brand new to playing, we've got information that's helpful to provide. If you're starting to enjoy it a little bit more and you want to take it to the next level, that's where we've got tools and supports that we want to make sure that you're aware of. And then yes, for those that are further along and might be experiencing harm from gambling, it may be an addiction, then we really want to make sure you're aware of the treatment and support services that we offer. And we have to cover all of those bases with the PlaySmart brand.
So you've been at this job for quite a few years now, and why is your work in multicultural marketing important to you? Why does it matter?
Well, to a certain extent, Balmoral and your agency have been a really great partner in understanding the benefit and the value that our marketing efforts can play. As I was mentioning earlier, we know that in certain cultural communities, the behaviors, the stigma, and the attitudes towards gambling can differ quite a bit. And so in order to provide those relevant messages, you really have to speak to people where they are. And cultural identity and that background is a really important part of that. We've done some really great work in the past few years to talk to our Chinese Canadian players, our South Asian players, a number of communities that have their own unique way in which they experience and are involved in gambling. And by having messages that are relevant to them, which you help us with quite a bit, by targeting the placement of those messages in media channels and in areas where we know they'll reach those players, then we can really be effective with the message. I think in all marketing, it's not one message for everybody anymore.
Absolutely.
You have to understand the audience, you have to have a relevant message, and you have to target it to the audience you're trying to get it to.
Actually, multicultural marketing is, brands perceive it as actually segmentation marketing, so you're really looking at a diverse culture. And it's a segment, but there's segments within segments. And what is the relevant message that you have to convey to them? And especially that you have to capture insights of why they look at a product that way. Is it some homeland behavior that they carry through? Is it going to be still there, or is it going to change? And for example, they might have already a bit of addiction when they're back home, right? So now with PlaySmart, and I don't think they're in other countries, especially like in India, that there's no such organization like a PlaySmart. They're not that sophisticated. And then when they come here, when they're on the verge of being into addiction, and I think PlaySmart will definitely be able to help with all its information.
Well, definitely PlaySmart is part of OLG's leadership in responsible gambling. It's a clear area where it shows that it's important to our company and our organization. And it really is something that we believe and that we invest in to benefit all players, not just those who might be experiencing harm or having problems. Really understanding how games work makes the games more fun. It's more fun to understand the dynamics of things, the rules, some of the misbeliefs that we might want to dispel. The supports that we make available in terms of being able to set spend limits, like budget your play and make sure that we're supporting you in there and reminding you of it. Those are things that all players can benefit from, whether or not they're experiencing any harm from gambling. For those that are experiencing harm, that's really about making sure that we're connecting them to the right supports and really reducing or eliminating their gambling. And that's another way that we show as a company we really take this seriously, is that if you're experiencing harm from gambling, we don't want to be profitable profiting from you. We
that's right.
we don't want those funds. We want to make sure that you're connected to the right supports, and we've got a good ecosystem in Ontario to connect to, including for cultural communities. There are supports available in language with organizations doing really great work, and we make sure that we're making our players aware of those things.
And I have noticed there are actually PlaySmart Centre in actually all the casinos.
All of them, correct.
And I've seen on the rack, and also they have videos that are actually in different languages, collateral material. I think it's suitable for people that maybe will be addicted, or people that are addicted. So it's actually very informational. And I found it great.
Yeah, those are great centers, and again, those are for everyone. If you are wanting to take a break from your play, then those centers are available. But also, if you just want some of that information as a brand new player who's coming into the casino for the first time, that's also a great place to stop. And that is quite unique in Ontario, that we have those centers that are available in all of our casinos, and that we've got staff there who are trained and who have the information available to support you. So it's really a great place for any players to go.
And for listeners that is not familiar, I should mention that each year 100% of OLG profits are actually invested back into the community, into the province, supporting critical infrastructure, operations, funding of hospital, funding of cultural festivals, and also supporting amateur sports and charities, and of course, in your case, delivering initiative to prevent problem gambling. So Aaron, from a social responsibility standpoint, what are you most passionate about in your work, and what gets you most excited that, the years that you've been there? Is there any checkpoint that you've noticed? It's little successes that you have?
Well, it's a very interesting and it's a great place to work. And the fact of what you just mentioned, that it is a government agency that exists to generate revenue for the government to support the community building and the infrastructure needs that we all have. It's one of the largest non-tax revenue sources to the government, and it's something that we are all focused on and committed to. So it's great to be able to work in a place that has that overall mission and commitment to give back to Ontario and give back to our community. In my specific work, it's, you mentioned in my bio before around using data to unlock good decision makings, and it is a data game. We are inundated with information that we have on transactions, on player segments, on attitudes and beliefs to different lines. So it is a very dynamic and interesting part of the job to find those insights out of the mountain of data that we have, and then use that to target messages and supports to players. And that's very interesting. We're coming up with new ways to get you a message at the right time that we think would be helpful for you. That's very hard to do. It requires a lot of testing and iteration and really understanding what you're trying to achieve. It also means tailoring our marketing messages, which is part of what we're talking about today, and getting really audience specific in the messages that we want to communicate, and then making sure that we're placing them in the right way. So that exercise of unlocking the information we have to provide the right supports to players, that's a really interesting part of my job.
And I have found, that's why, I have to sort of reiterate what OLG represents. People are saying, oh, wow, you want us to buy the lottery. Most of the time they feel, oh, maybe we don't win the big prize, but I think the message is that you have little wins. But most importantly, I think from what I just mentioned, is that not a lot of people know the money you raised are given to so many charities. And I think that message have to be pointed out again and again, that this is for the community and for the province. And now, as you say, you love data, right? So you said to use it to draw insights from your past experience in organization that would obviously be able to have key decision making, and also in the messaging, right? The data will tell you, interpret it as to what to say. Have you been successful from the information getting from the data, the insights? What is it that we're going to communicate? Let's say the under 35, how are you going to communicate with them? And How has the role of data in multicultural marketing impacted PlaySmart?
Well, it's really shifted our efforts, particularly in the last few years. I think what would be known to our audience is that Ontario is a very diverse place to begin with and becoming more and more diverse. And so any business in Ontario, certainly OLG is one of them, has to be aware of that fact and knows that its players and its customers come from many different cultural backgrounds. And so you really do have to be conscious of that, and then make sure you're authentic in the way that you communicate to your players. So certainly we've got insights that we continue to invest in to do that. We know that, for example, when we are working on our last Lunar New Year campaign with Chinese Ontarians, that can be more around dispelling certain beliefs around gambling, certain superstitions, doing it in a really light and fun way that can cause people to self-reflect and just know that gambling is fun, but no matter what lucky charm you have, how many times you wash your hands, any of those things, the odds are going to be the same.
Yes.
And if you can do that in an authentic and relevant way, you see the benefit in terms of people completing the video. That's a big thing these days. Most people just skip after that first 5 seconds. So when we know that somebody who's watched our campaign to the end, that makes a big difference. And when we do these relevant messages, we're way better at that. We also see it increase in terms of the awareness after the fact, the ability to recall the message. And that's all really important to communicating with, in our case, players, but to your customers, is making sure that they remember your ad, that they know what you were trying to communicate to them, and that you did it in a really authentic way. And that's been really fun to do. You've been great partners in that.
Thank you. And of course, to share the fun part that you said, that superstitions, is play a very a part in the Chinese behavior. Chinese think that they have full control of gambling. That's the internal part. And then the external part, they would say, wow, all these factors, where I sit, whether I have a money tree next to me. And then the funniest part is that if they're playing mahjong, they feel, oh my God, I've been losing. I better cut this luck from my opponent. So the one thing that they do is they go to the washroom. So that would make them more lucky, wash their hands, come back, because the flow cut the chance of winning of their. So these are little things that are very unique to the behavior of certain cultural groups. And of course, the South Asian have their own idiosyncrasy as far as in gambling, and so are the Filipino. So thank you for sharing the insights of the behavior. And if you are within a networking event, and the work you've done with us today, thank you very much for telling the audience that, what is that you have most proud of and you want other business leaders to know about it? Specific knowledge, is there a case, things other than like Chinese New Year? What are some of the general information that you feel that they should know? Well,
I think what I most appreciate in our multicultural marketing efforts, and in the relationship that we have with you and your team at Balmoral, is the trust that allows us to take risks. It's not just a brief from the company to the agency and then we kind of deliver on that. There's a dialogue, there's testing out ideas, there's making some strong suggestions, and that really gets to a better place. We've been very effective together. I think we're winning awards every year.
Yes, we have been.
Sharifa, this past year we won a global award in London in the UK, recognizing our efforts on our Lunar New Year campaign and how effective that strategy was. And all of our work together has been a dialogue where your team has brought ideas to the table that at first can be funny, can be eyebrow raising, and you want to make sure you do it in an authentic way, and that it doesn't seem too tokenistic. when you're the company that's trying to move those ideas forward. But because we have really good partners, because we've got a lot of faith together, we've done some interesting things that have turned out to be wildly effective, and really exceeded our expectations on exposure, on completion, on recall, on any of those measures that you use to determine the effectiveness of a marketing campaign. The work that we've done together has exceeded on all of those fronts, and so we're really pleased about that.
Thank you. Our principle has always been that we don't just say yes to everything from the client and even from the brief. And I think in order to do justice for our client, we have to push the boundary. And of course, with a government agency, we got to push the boundary within what is permitted within the brand. And I think that with collaboration and the client trusting why we're pushing the boundary will actually bring better success, you know, through the campaign, and exploring avenues that they, you know, client have never thought of. And I think that will be the best results and outcome. And thank you very much for accepting the way we propose ourselves propose our
never
ideas.
Change.
Yeah. And let's dive into a little bit about your own career and personal life. And in the LinkedIn profile, you love to make space for diverse communities, and also always learn from different perspectives and live experience. Can you tell us, what do you mean by you love to make space for diverse community?
Well, this may be a more challenging one for me in terms of my own personal journey, because for me, I was born in Scarborough. I was born to mixed race parents. I'm Guyanese on one side and I'm Irish and Italian on another. And so my identity has always been very mixed, very diverse, and something that I've been acutely aware of. But then I'm also quite conscious of the fact that I present, and I have as a result of the way that I present, white privilege. And I don't always face the same discrimination, marginalization, and challenges that my own parents or grandparents have faced in coming to this country. So it's something that I'm acutely aware of, and try to do my best to show off everything, all the wonder of the diversity that we have here in Ontario. I've tried to do that in a number of ways. In all of my professional experiences, I work to make sure that we are conscious of cultural diversity and that we're integrating it. You talked about the Pan Am Games. Yeah. When we did that in Ontario, one of the first things that I had a chance to work on was creating tables of cultural communities to work with the organizing committee to say how they would want to be involved in the celebrations and in those athletic events. I went on to lead the Pride Festival in Toronto, which is one of the largest Pride festivals in the world. And in our first year, we had a Bollywood stage, we had a Caribbean stage. We really wanted to profile all of the intersections that exist within the LGBT plus community, and make sure that we were doing justice to that. And that's something that I've taken throughout my career. Certainly something that I do at OLG, and currently I have the really good fortune of being the vice chair of an organization that's building a Black Art Center in Toronto, in the Oakwood Village neighborhood, which is the first art center in the country that's dedicated exclusively to supporting and profiling Black talent and celebrating Black art. So it's a privilege to be able to work in a way that uplifts other aspects of cultural identity and really celebrates how diverse it is. It's part of what's great to live here.
It's admirable, like, you know, your commitment to so many different organizations, in particular diverse community organization, and like similar to what I do, you have to be very passionate about it. It's not something, oh, I'm going to do it just because my work want me to do it, but it's really a commitment to the community, and it has to come from the heart, right? Because if you do it from the heart, people know about it. That it's not because you're superficial, it's because you honestly want to make a difference within the different communities. And that's great, you know, that you have so many experience that you could share with us.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege, and authenticity is one of those things. You have to do it. Otherwise, people see right through it, and you're going to fail. So if you're not authentic about it, then don't bother.
Oh, people pick it up easily, you know. So is there any milestone career, moments in your career? And then you've been with the government, you've been in private sector, you've been in government agency. Milestone moment that you feel, aha, that's an aha moment that I felt, hey, either I have achieved something, or is that I've made something turn the corner that you feel you're so proud of. Many, right?
Well, I've been lucky. I've been very lucky, and so certainly there's a couple that I can think of. Maybe most recently, I was on hand for the opening of the Nia Centre for the Arts, the Black Arts Centre that I mentioned earlier, and that was a project that took over 5 years to build.
Really?
Over $9 million in funding. That when we started, I don't think many people believed that we were going to be able to pull it off. And based on the leadership of not me, but our executive director and others at the organization, with the right support, we were able to get the funding together and then build this incredible facility right in the heart of a historically Black community in Toronto, and then to open that and to see what it meant to the artists and community members who were there for the opening. That was really special. Wow. I think kind of outside of those milestone moments or those key achievements that people might reflect on is, for me, it's been the people that I get to work with. Seeing really talented individuals from really diverse backgrounds who come together and grow and do really great things, and then go on to be better than you and go on to do great things. I think that ability to work with colleagues from different backgrounds and to see them succeed is something that I really enjoy.
And certainly in all the organization, government agency, now in Ontario, the workforce, it looks like it's totally very diverse. It's about time, you know. And if you're talking about 30 years, 25 years ago, one look of it, oh no, it's not. But I think that we have made progress, definitely. And I think that from the political side, from the community side, you know, it's good for Ontario where you would employ different diverse communities, because all of them bring their own culture and experience, and some of them are immigrants, right? And also bring their experience, work experience that they're from their homeland. And for me, being in the business for 35 years, being out in the community for 40 years, I think that we have turned a bit of the corner. Have we done, you know, tremendously well? Not yet. There's still a little bit
always more to do.
Room for improvement, and that's really applaudable. And I just want to ask you, with this Black Art Center, is it representation? And we always in our community and advertising will say ACB, African, Caribbean, Black community. So does that art center reflect, as you say, your Guyanese, and is it reflecting all of those Black communities?
Well, as in many aspects of identity, things are very complex, have many intersections, and have many layers to them. So it is very difficult, if not inadvisable, to try to really box people in with one label or another, because people are many things. And certainly that is true for the Black community. There are many intersections for that identity. Members and people in the Black community who have been here far longer than I have, far longer than many of us have.
Generations.
And others who have just got here from many different parts of the world. And so, I think in the context of the project that I was talking about, the Nia Centre for the Arts, that's about making space for all Black identity, irrespective of your intersections and how you have experienced and live your Blackness. And that what we do know is that creativity and having a safe space to explore your your identity, to express yourself in an authentic way is something that can generate real benefits for individual people, but also for communities. And that's what we try to do with the Nia Centre.
That's wonderful, the way that it's putting together. So I consider you as a change maker, and there's one thing if you say to the leaders, marketing leaders, who may not be familiar with, have not been still with multicultural marketing, what is the most important consideration that they should look at before they dip their toes into this discipline?
Well, I think to a certain extent, having a multicultural marketing strategy, I would hope and I would argue, should be intuitive to any company, to any marketing team. Because what we all know these days is that, as I mentioned before, one message doesn't work for everybody. You have many different aspects of your customer's identity, and you have to meet them where they are in a relevant and authentic way. And so having a multicultural approach and understanding cultural identity in your marketing strategies is key to success. It's also very efficient and effective, because cultural communities have certain events that they gather around, certain media networks that they read or participate in, certain social media networks, all kinds. It makes it very efficient and effective to create a message that is tailored to that community and then to target it with your media buy. So from a business side of things, if I was talking to a business on this, I would say that it's really smart. You know that your customers have this lens, and you know that you can reach them in a really efficient and effective way. So to not do that is maybe a little bit wasteful.
Yes, absolutely. And I have found in industry that some brands are saying, well, I'm doing what we call D&I. So what they would roll out in OLVs and all that is that they put a check mark. Okay, I have a Chinese there. I have a Black community. I have South Asian. And then they would say, well, we did our job. But also at the same time, what I found, the messaging is not tailored, it's not authentic, and because there's so many different communities, you got to be relevant to each of the community. But the objective of the brand can be the same. Obviously, we're not going to deviate from it, right? But however, how you're speaking to those diverse community, and I found in particular is that what is the platform that you are sending these messages out? You cannot say, oh, I'm talking to this community, but then you have a mainstream buy. So what are you trying to say? So I think there is still this hump, or barrier or challenge that some brands are still looking at in that way, right?
Yeah. Well, for brands that are experiencing that hump and going through that checklist exercise, one of the things I'd be curious to know is what that team looks like. Because if they don't have diversity on their own team, then they're unlikely to be able to do it in an authentic way and to fall down some of those traps of an inauthentic checkbox exercise. Now that's so the first thing to do would be to look at your own team and to make sure that you've got diverse perspectives around the table. And the second thing to do would be to work with a really dynamic agency like yourselves.
Thank you. Thank you so
and to get the right advice, and then to trust the advice when you get it, and to really double down on it. And I think that's how you can overcome that hump.
So Aaron, do you have any word of wisdom that you can share with our audience today, the takeaways, that you feel with your experience that you have with the many organizations and also with OLG, is there a couple of takeaways or words of wisdom that you want to share?
Well, I think words of wisdom, that's hard for me. I don't know if I have the wisdom yet. I hope people have words of wisdom for me, and I want some wisdom before I impart it myself.
That's
funny. But I would say that in line with the conversation that we've been having, that really understanding the diverse identities of your employees and your customers is a very worthwhile exercise. You don't just do it to check the box or to have your DEI strategy or to say that you're doing it. When you do it, you get a better work environment, you get a better workforce, you get better ideas, and then you get more engaging campaigns with your customers that show better results. Like, it really does all bear out. It is not just made up that happens. Diverse perspectives create a better understanding of your customers, and using that understanding of your customers allows you to talk to them in more relevant ways, which then makes them more loyal and want to do more business with you. It really does go around like that. I've seen it myself, and so trust what you're hearing on that.
Well, those are words of wisdom. My God, like you
Doing
did
my
really
best.
share them very, very well. And of course, you said you have other people that advise you, and I'm sure that along the way of your career, I'm sure you have mentors too, that in the different organization. So we're almost at the end of our podcast. And for any listeners who want to learn about your work or follow you on social media, where should they go online? Maybe you can tell me, is it part of the PlaySmart website? Where should they go?
Well, certainly for our work, playsmart.ca and the PlaySmart website is where we talk about all of our programs that we have at OLG under the PlaySmart brand, and you can get to learn a little bit more. It really is something that we invest a lot in, and we try our best to maximize what's available there. And so certainly, if viewers are interested, I'd encourage them to go there. Otherwise, I can be found on LinkedIn. I think you found me on that because I can hear some of those messages being used. And certainly on my joke about wisdom, I really do like connecting with new people and listening and learning from the experience and the expertise of others. That's been something that's been very beneficial to me. So I'm always happy when people reach out and want to chat. I benefit as much as they might enjoy talking to me.
Yeah. So again, if you have personal information for Aaron, it's definitely LinkedIn. And then for PlaySmart is playsmart.ca. So there's so much of information. If you personally feel that you have friends or relatives that may be on the verge of being addicted, there's lots of information there and for you to share with them, in not an intrusive way, but also more education and information, right? So thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much to be my featured guest for this podcast. Absolutely a pleasure, and we always have great conversation.
We do.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and rate and review the show. Join us next time for another journey into the exciting world of multicultural marketing.